Hi and welcome to this video in the MRDCL Understanding Concepts series. In this video we're going to look at assigning values to a variable in an efficient way. There's some inefficient ways of doing this, but there's also some very efficient ways that reduce your run times and improve your productivity. You'll find the files from this video in DAT 105. The main reason for actually showing you this is because I see a number of scripts where people assign values to a whole list of serial numbers. So they may have 10,000 serial numbers they actually want to assign a value to. Maybe it's amount spent, gender, age, or some other external data that you want to plug in. And many people do this in a fairly inefficient way. So let's look at some basic syntax first and then see how to perhaps apply this technique. So if we open up this script here, what this script shows you is that if you've got a variable called rating, which is picking up codes 1 to 5 with an error bit on the end, you can assign in an integer the values for each of the values in rating. So what this syntax means is that for the first value of the variable rating, 5 will be assigned, 4 for the second, 3 for the third, and so on, and the error bit on the end will get an undefined value assigned to it. Now, quite often I've seen people write this code as something like if rating is 1, di $value equals 5, and then they copy and paste that and say if rating is 2, the value is 4, and so on. Now that doesn't really make too much difference, even though it's slightly inefficient and means a lot of copying and pasting and more risk of making errors. That doesn't really make much difference in a variable that's only got 5 or 6 codes in it. But if you've got a whole long list of serial numbers, maybe 10,000, 50,000, even 500,000 serial numbers that you want to assign a value to, that can start to become a very inefficient way of using MRDCL and significantly slowing down your run times. Like any piece of software that you name, if statements, whether that be programming in Visual Basic or Java, anything, if statements tend to be the most inefficient pieces of code you can write and use the most processing time. And you can see here in MRDCL below it that you could define a variable of 32,000 responses or 32,500 responses, and I could assign a value to each of those. And in this dummy code, I've just actually assigned 1 to every single response. And if you want to just see what that looks like in a longer version, so here it is defining a variable of 32,500 bits, and I'm assigning 1 to every one. Now in the real world you'll probably assign a different value, but if I go down to the bottom of the script, you'll see I'm at the 32,508th line in the script, and I've assigned all those values to it. Now that's a much more efficient way of using MRDCL than saying if var is 1, assign a certain value, if var is 2, assign another value. And that applies when it comes to assigning values to serial numbers. So let's look at a more practical example now. I'm going to take you to this data here, and if you'll just familiarize yourself with this, you'll see that I've got a list of serial numbers. I've got 5,000 serial numbers, and I've got 10 variables. I call them Q1 to Q10, where I'm assigning different values for each respondent. Now, if we did that with if statements, because there's 10 fields here of data and 5,000 respondents, that would mean 50,000 if statements to say that if it's serial number 1, I want to assign a value of 2 for question 1, and a value of 1 for question 2, and so on. And it will be a lot of code which would be slow to process. And indeed, we've actually programmed that beforehand here. So I've got a file here called inefficient MRDCL script, and if we open that, you can see that I've got a data statement here with all those lines in it, rather like the spreadsheet. And then it says here, if the serial number is the number in the first column of this spreadsheet, or this data statement in this case, we want to make the value for question 1 and so on, the value in here. Again, if we look at that in a listing file, it becomes a little bit easier to understand. So you can see what it's doing. When it's converted the pre-process, saying if the serial number is 1, make question 1 a 2. If the serial number is 2, make question 1 a 1, and so on. And then further down the file, we get to question 2, and if serial number is 1, it assigns another value, and it does that for all 5,000 serial numbers. Now that code is highly inefficient and really not recommended as a way of processing that sort of data. So we have another file here called efficient script. Now the syntax is a little bit more complicated, but it's not. It really just can be used and reused over and over again. So here we're setting the number of cells in that data statement, which is what in fact we did in the previous script, counting the number of cells, and then we're picking up all the different serial numbers in a variable called serials. And then for each integer we want to set up, we're assigning the value based on the serial numbers. Now again, this script will look a lot easier to understand if you look at the listing file. So here, first of all, it's picking up all the serial numbers in that huge data statement, or it could be from that spreadsheet. There they all are. And then what it's doing, it's saying that I want to assign a value to xiq1, where I'm picking up the variable serials, and for each of the serial numbers in that list above, it's assigning 2 for the first serial number, 1 for the second, 1 for the third, 3 for the fourth, and so on. So that would be the same as saying, if we just scroll up to the top again, that for the first serial number, which is number 1, I want to assign the first value in that list, for the second serial number, another value, and so on. And you can see how much more efficient this script is. It's just a few lines of code once it's dropped out. And just to show you how much quicker that is, I've just got this ready to run. If I execute this, just watch it run here. So the inefficient way, you can see it's processing the variables here. It's just 5,000 records in this recode or this back data, and that took something like 9 seconds to run. Let's look at the efficient script and run that, and well, it done that in less than a second, I would suggest, incredibly quicker, more quickly. And of course, if that was a bigger project with more serial numbers or more data that you wanted to assign to each serial number, that time would increase. And of course, the more other variables that you're handling within the project would start to possibly make the difference in runtime minutes rather than just a few seconds, as it was in that example there. So this script is recommended as a way of handling recodes, or where you want to assign values to lots of serial numbers. The script that you're using here, or we can use here, is pretty generic. You could apply this very easily to any sort of backcoding, with making some very minor adjustments to cope with the width of the spreadsheet that you're bringing in. You can use it to read direct from a spreadsheet if you want to, rather than a data statement. And all these scripts are available and downloadable from our website using a link. You'll find a blog article on this that you can use as well to take you through this step by step, and of course with a link to the download files that you can use for your own purposes. I hope that makes things more efficient for you when you're running things, and try and avoid saying if IOBS followed by a recode for a whole list of serial numbers, because you may well make your runs significantly much faster than you would normally. And indeed, I have seen cases where people are recoding or backcoding data from large numbers of serial numbers on a monthly basis, and their runs have dropped by as much as an hour or more in terms of processing, because if statements are so inefficient to process. Hope that helps you, and there's more videos, of course, on our website and more information available.